Welcome back. This short video clip, we're going to introduce variables in the Python programming language. Last time or before, we talked about values. We talked about how different values have different types. And now, as we progress and we want to write more complex code, not only do we need values, but we're going to want to store values for use over and over again, or to manipulate data, so on and so forth. So we're going to introduce the concept of variables. And variables is a very simple concept. If you remember back to we talked about basic building blocks of a computer, we have memory. And I like to, when I talk about memory, I like to teach it, use the visual like a bookshelf. Okay, we're going to draw one here very quickly. And a bookshelf, of course, contains a bunch of books. Okay, what's nice about books is they contain a lot of information, and we can retrieve a book off the bookshelf. We can use, we can read, we can take advantage of the information. We can put it back on the bookshelf for use for later on. Well, a variable is very much like a bookshelf. So what's going to happen in the Python language, we're going to create a variable. And for this example here, until we get into the code, let's just call it my number. We'll call it my num for short. I'm going to use the underscore here. This is a convention in Python that's used a lot. This is called an underscore. And we use it to connect two words together. We can't have a space in the variables. We're going to get into what's allowed in variable names. And then we're going to assign my num. Let's do 3. I always liked the number 3. It was Babe Ruth's number. I used to always choose that when I was growing up in Little League. So I want to take the value of 3. Now think about this. We talked about this before. What type is 3? Okay, you should know it's an integer. So we're going to take the value 3, type integer, and we're going to assign that value to this variable called my number. And I use that word, I'm being very deliberate with that word. This becomes, when we talk about variables, this is called the assignment operator. It's not an equal sign. I know that's counterintuitive. We're not saying my num equals 3 in the mathematical sense. What we're doing is we're taking the value 3 of type integer, we're assigning it to my number. And where is my number? Well, my number is located in memory on the bookshelf. So here's our memory, and this is an abstraction, but this will work for the purposes of this course. Here it is. And if I could label it, you're not going to be able to see it, but this is my num. We're placing it on the bookshelf ready to be used. Now, within our code, we come down and we write some code down here. Okay, these dots represent some code. And I want to go and reference this my num variable. I simply have to use it. I just say my num. And it's like pulling it off the bookshelf. Now, what does my num contain? Well, it contains the value of 3. Okay, that's a pretty good introduction. Let's go through a couple of examples of code, and we'll call it good. We want to keep this fairly short and straightforward. Okay, I'm in the gadget. I'm pulling a gadget editor over here. In fact, we can probably go full screen there. And let's just try. Let's start off with what we just did. Let's try my num, make that a little bigger for y'all, equals 3. Now check this out. We've stored it on the bookshelf, so to speak. Okay, we've stored it in memory. Now I want to recall it. All I have to do is use the name, and I can say print my num. What do you think is going to happen? Let's get this centered over here. Let's run the program and find out. Well, it does kind of what we think it would do, right? We've got 3. We assigned it to my num, and now we can use it. We can also check the type of my num. Well, What type is it? Now we know it's an integer. We've talked about that already. Well, let's just verify that with code. Okay, there we go. We can also perform, it's an integer type. We can do math with integers. So let's do mynum times 3. And that should work out fine because we've got an integer here and we've got an integer here, and we're going to multiply those together. Let's take a look at that. Okay, the value of 9. All right, so there we go. There's the introduction to variables. Now let's talk about variable names. This is important. What can you use for a variable name? Well, you can use anything that starts with a letter or an underscore that is valid and does not contain special characters. And usually we want our variable names to be descriptive. What I mean by that is when we're working with some, let's say we're calculating a percentage of a some kind of a problem. Well, I can create a variable called percentage equals, and it may be a ratio of something. Let's say let's just do some math. We could actually do some math right in the assignment. 34 divided by 44 times 100. That'll give us a percentage. Okay, and let's print percentage and take a look and see what that does. Okay, and there we go. We have a percentage calculation. So we want our variable names to represent the data that's being assigned to them. Okay, let's do some other examples of valid variable names. We saw the underscore already. We can use numbers. We can say I'm going to do some case, use some uppercase letters. mynum1 equals 10. mynum2 equals 20. So see, we're using numerical characters. Those are just fine. Capitals are just fine. Those are all valid. What's not valid, though, is something like mynum $$. That, when we try to run this, we're going to get a syntax error. It's going to say, hey, no go. Not going to work for a variable name. Okay, so very simply, variable names start with numeric characters, and they can be, I mean, shoot, we could make one that looks like garbage. We wouldn't want to do this because it's going to be difficult to reference it in the future. And then we can set anything we want to variable. It could be a string. This is a poor example. Let's do this. Poor but valid example, if I can spell, of a variable name. Okay. Variable, I think I spelled that right. And we can run that. Of course, well, let's get our invalid name out of there, and that'll work just fine. No problem. We can recall that, except you've got to get that just right. But just to demonstrate it for kicks, let's print that variable name. Or let's print the value contained in that variable. Okay, and we can see that in the result. All right, a couple other things real quick. No spaces in variable names. Let's go down to a new space here, a new gadget. So mynum equals 10, and we try to run that. Nope, syntax error, can't have spaces in variable names. Okay, and lastly, any type of any word that's a built-in function or a keyword within the Python language is not going to work for a variable. So if I go down, we know a few of these right now. One might be print. Well, print's a keyword. That's already a built-in function. So if I say print equals my variable, Python's not going to like this because it knows, in fact, print is a built-in function, and we're not using that built-in function correctly, so it's going to throw an error. Okay, it's not going to like that. What are some other words that we know? Well, type is a built-in function. Int is a built-in function. Float. None of these can be used as variable names, and in fact, in your readings for this one, we'll end on this. Shrink this back down. If you look at your readings in your lessons, and you go to variable names and keywords, you're going to get a whole chart here. None of these can work as variable names. They're all keywords, true, false. Those are Boolean values. Is, in, finally. I'm not going to go through them all. Just know that you can't use those. I hope this was helpful in understanding what names can be used as variable names. What can we store in variables? Pretty much anything. Strings, integers, floats, Boolean values, lists, and on and on and on. We'll get into that more throughout the semester. Thank you. We'll see you next time.